Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Tom's Hardware Show. Here with me today, I've got Sharon Harding, our senior editor, and Paul Alcorn, our senior editor, and I'm Avram Pilch, your editor-in-chief. And there's a lot of cool stuff for us to talk about today. So let's start with the stuff that let's give everybody a little secret preview of some of the stuff we're working on right now, the not so super secret stuff that we can talk about. Sharon, anything interesting you're working on? Any secret stuff the audience should not so secret stuff the audience should look forward to?
Yeah, well, they should definitely check out our website right now because I just put up a review of the latest keyboard that I've been checking out. It's actually not available yet. It won't be available until May 12th, so it's kind of a little early preview. It's a collaboration between HyperX and Ducky, and it's actually a mini keyboard that I have right here, if you could see. So this is a 60% keyboard, which means there are a lot of things missing from a full-size board. There's no numpad and there's no navigational keys, which also means there's no arrow keys. So for the past about a week or so that I've been testing this, I have been noticeably less productive because the arrow keys come in handy, don't they?
Yeah. We were going to talk about that later in the show, but that's quite a controversial topic that we'll get into more shortly. How about you, Paul? What exciting stuff should people? We have some exciting stuff that you just put up, which we'll talk about in a minute. What exciting things are you working on right now?
Well, we have CPUs in for testing. Of course, we can't say which ones, even though I'm sure everybody pretty much knows.
I mean, we won't talk about anything like that. But there's always CPUs coming in for testing. Sometimes not even AMD or Intel CPUs. Like for example, the other day you reviewed a Zhaoshin CPU from China. But any particular articles people should look forward to? I know we were talking a bit about that we're working on to really compile a good roundup for all of the things that people really need to know about the upcoming Ryzen chips.
Yep, the Ryzen 4000 series. We've actually learned quite a bit. Some of it from the company. And some of it through more indirect ways of, the timelines associated with it and what the architecture is gonna look like. So we have a lot of juicy details to share. So we're looking forward to that one.
Well, for me, it's there's obviously we have been getting a lot of Pi stuff. I'm doing a roundup of micro SD cards. Now, you might think that is a little bit strange because they're fairly similar, but if you were booting your computer off of one and you needed to know which one was faster than another, you will soon find out. I also have a stack of Raspberry Pi cases to go through and a stack of Raspberry Pi cameras to test, including the new high quality camera that came out last week. Obviously, I've got some laptops here as well. But let's talk about what's new and cool today. So Paul, just today we put up our review of 2 new AMD chips. Tell us about that.
Well, AMD is finally reaching down into the basically around the 100 with its new Ryzen 3 3300X and 3100 processors. There are 4 cores and 8 threads. They provide a surprising amount of performance, especially for gamers. It's really probably going to be best suited for gamers who aren't looking to do more intense work like multi-threaded workloads or necessarily streaming. They just want to build a pretty capable gaming rig. So they're pretty exciting, and it's in a way they kind of take the shine off of some of AMD's faster, bigger and more expensive processors, at least in terms of gaming, because they're so good.
Does this put AMD ahead of Intel in the processor wars? I mean, it looks like particularly if you read Paul's article on AMD versus Intel CPUs. Is this yet another win for Team Red?
Oh, it's absolutely a win for AMD in a lot of different ways. One of them is they're bringing, with these processors, they're bringing out the B550 motherboards, which open up PCIe 4.0 at a lower price point, which is good for everybody. But that's a real big advantage that they have over Intel right now. And also, from a performance standpoint, they easily beat any Intel chip that's in the same price range. Now, Intel does have its Comet Lake chips coming soon. I don't think they've said exactly when, but they have made the official announcement of the chips, so we know the specifications and the pricing. And from what I see, I don't think they have a real good competitor against these chips coming, even with the Comet Lake series. So AMD should be able to dominate that segment of the market for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, Sharon, what do you think? Do you think AMD is continuing to pull ahead?
Yeah, I mean, looking over at Paul's review, it's pretty interesting to see some of the capabilities of these new chips, despite their low price. I think as enthusiasts, we love to see innovation and more speed and more capabilities. But when it comes to what you're actually buying, I think there's a lot of people who are happy to just find a good companion for like a mid to low end graphics cards, and maybe it doesn't handle multitasking and streaming and things like that as well, but I think there are a lot of people that, like Paul said, just want like a solid gaming rig. And with these chips, they can do it at some good prices, it seems.
Yeah, I think, obviously we won't say that Intel is, completely out of it. There's a lot of good reasons to buy an Intel CPU. But if you look round by round, when it comes to value, when it comes to the amount of performance you get, the cores, when it comes to innovation and new features like PCIe 4, AMD just keeps winning, and Intel frankly needs to step up their game right now, because you just get a lot more for your money with AMD. Although if you want to be at the really high end, particularly in terms of clock speed, you still want to go with Intel, something like the Core i9 9900K. Really, you can't out clock speed that. You can get more cores with AMD, but you can't get a faster clock speed, which could make a difference in gaming where it's really lightly threaded. I see somebody from the chat room says, will there be a Zen 2 update to 3200G? Paul, what do you think?
Oh, well, absolutely. That's a good point. So the 3200G, even though it does have the Ryzen 3000 branding, it's actually on the previous gen architecture. AMD, as part of the announcement of the B550 motherboards, they said that it's kind of a strange situation. The B550 motherboards don't support the 3200G or the 3400G because they're not Zen 2 processors. But AMD said, because there are currently no APUs supported for B550, that we can expect the next gen APUs to come very soon. And they're not saying exactly when, but they are saying it will be very soon, and those will be Zen 2. Those will be Renoir.
So someone else asks, how come AMD does not support Zen 3 on B450 motherboards?
Some of that is a limitation of BIOS ROM chips. So when you plug in your chip, it has to be able to communicate with the BIOS. It has to identify it, and the BIOS has to understand that processor. So it has a table of information inside of it. AMD has supported the AM4 socket for so long that the list of processors is so long they can't fit all of them inside of those ROM chips. They've literally run out of capacity. So while it's really good that Intel makes you switch sockets all the time, AMD is staying on AM4 and will for some more time, but it does create problems that Intel doesn't have because they just can't store enough data on the chip. So AMD, has to make decisions on where to cut support.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, certainly doing better than Intel with the level of support that they're offering. So Speaking,
it can get quite complicated. Like, when we test lower end AMD processors, a lot of them won't work on the flagship motherboards. Especially previous gen chips, the low end ones won't work on them. So we have to step down to cheaper boards because it's just a strange situation.
so compatibility is not quite what they claim, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, AMD has been forthright about it, but the real problem that they ran into is motherboard vendors have the choice of which chips they will support right now. So MSI, for instance, may support some chips on some motherboards and then other chips on others, and others not here and others not there. So if you just look at MSI as a company, it's a very complicated list of where those chips are supported and where they're not. And then if you zoom out and you take into account Asus has different policies, and Gigabyte, everybody has their own support matrix, so it's just all over the place. Now AMD with B550 is trying to solve that, and the way that they're doing that is they're saying only new chips and the current Zen 2. They want to eliminate that confusion. So it's kind of a tough thing to do, though. They have to make a hard cut.
So this week we saw some interesting new announcements outside of the CPU space. Yesterday we heard about new Surfaces coming out. New Surface Go 2, Surface Book 3. Finally some headphones. What do you guys think about those? Do you think these are going to be? I mean, we haven't gotten to review them yet, but we're hoping to. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of these? Do you think that Microsoft is making a compelling case for people to buy the Go now that they've stepped it up a little bit? Do you feel like people are going to spend the big money to get the Surface Book 3?
It's a lot of money. So the Surface Book 3 looks like it's starting at $2,300, and that's just the starting price. So it's just like a lot of money right now. And you have the Surface Go starting at $400, which is obviously less. But with the form factors, I think the part of the price is coming in these portable form factors and having the detachable keyboard and things like that. And it's just for a portable device, which is likely going to be a secondary device for somebody who has a heavy duty rig at home. It's just a lot of money to spend on something like that, I think.
Yeah, I think the Go, like the Surface Book, makes sense for somebody who is maybe a creative professional. They have the money. I've personally found that the Surface Book, to me, is the best design of a 2-in-1 because it is really good as a laptop and really good as a tablet. And I haven't seen really anything else in the market that was really good at being both. Like, you've got the regular Surfaces, which are really good at being a tablet, but the keyboard, I know there are people who like it. You're entitled, but it's really not good on your lap. It bounces around on your lap, so it's not really lappable because the keyboard is really thin. And then you've got things like the Yoga, which is the Spectre X360, the really most common 2-in-1 form factor, which is the bend back 360-degree one, and that works great as a laptop. But it's kind of bulky as a tablet because you're going to bend it back and then you've got the keyboard under it and it's kind of heavy and you've got all this extra stuff around it, thick bezel, all that stuff, because it's not really its primary purpose is being a laptop. And to be fair, if people are buying that as a primary device, probably the laptop should come first. For me, it certainly would. But there you have with the Surface Book something where the keyboard is real and is real. It's got a lot of weight and heft to it and a good keyboard. I mean, at least it's been a good keyboard up until now. I haven't touched a new one, but should be similar. And then you hit a button and the screen detaches, and it's really detached. It doesn't have super long battery life when detached because there's part of the battery load is in the keyboard. But it's a functioning good Windows tablet. So I personally, I really like the design of the Surface Book. I don't understand why we haven't seen anybody else really try to do it. I mean, it reminds me of Lenovo had something called the Helix a few years back that was kind of doing this, and then they stopped. So it's a good design, and it's loaded with pretty decent power for what it is, right? I mean, you can get it with up to I think a 1660 on the 15-inch model on the 1650. So while that's not fantastic gaming, that's pretty good for creative professionals, and they can detach and use the pen and everything like that. So I think for those folks who, if you're a creative professional, you're used to spending a lot of money on a PC, it makes sense. But the Go is an interesting concept, right? It's $399, but that's without the keyboard, which is like $100. And buying that without a keyboard is like buying a car with no air conditioning or something. Like, yeah, you could drive it, but no one wants to sit in it for too long. So, they really ought to. I mean, we've said this for years, but Microsoft really just ought to put the keyboard in the box. Pretty much everybody else who does a 2-in-1 does. But $399, it's cute. You give it to your kid, but it's not cheap. $399 for when you can get laptops for under that, and then you've got to spend at least like $500 to have it with the keyboard. So, I mean, I used the last gen one and I liked it a lot. It was great for me to say like, oh, great, I want to have a tablet around just to play with tablet stuff. But when it's time to do real work, I'm using my real laptop or a real desktop. So, I feel like it's a little bit of a hard sell to people who know who are like doing serious productivity, and to those who are sort of on a budget, you could get, and you just want a main device for yourself with a family, you could get a laptop for a lot cheaper than that. That's not a 2-in-1, that has like a much more powerful processor in it and more storage and all that. Although the screen, albeit a 10.5-inch, baby size screen, is always really good on those surfaces. So,
but can you put a price on that 3:2 aspect ratio? All these surfaces are coming out with the 3:2, which I know if our laptop editor Andrew was watching, he prefers it for productivity and reading, and that's not really something you could find on every laptop. Most of them are doing 16:9 right now.
Yeah, we're seeing, we've started to see some 16:10s. Recently, I reviewed the XPS 13, which was 16:10, and Dell treated it like it's a big innovation to go back to 16:10. Those who will remember back in the day, like, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, 16:10 was the standard on laptops. And then not because it was good for the user, but because the panel manufacturers wanted to push people towards push the laptop vendors towards 16:9, because 16:9 was what they were using for TVs, and movies are filmed in 16:9. So they made it 16:9 so they could just keep using that aspect ratio across all devices, or at least across laptops plus TVs. And it was very bad for the user because you lost vertical real estate. Like the worst thing, and there's still laptops that have this. Please don't buy one. Do yourself a favor. Do me a favor, because if you buy one, you're saying it's okay, and we don't want to say it's okay to make a screen that's 1366 by 768. That is like what they call HD on some laptops is 1366 by 768. They should call it super low definition, because you're only getting 760 pixels of vertical real estate. That means, like, just to see this video, you probably have to scroll a whole bunch. Like, unless you enjoy the scroll wheel, like, you want more vertical pixels. Vertical pixels, in fact, are more important than horizontal pixels if you're getting work done, because that's what you're using to view web pages, to edit documents, to read threads on our forum. Like, those are the things that matter, right? I mean, you could watch movies a little bit more accurately on 16:9, but I don't know. For me, that's what my TV is for. Like, I'll watch a movie on my laptop, but I'm not expecting cinematic quality out of the laptop. What I'm expecting to do is get some stuff done, or maybe game or something, but not, So it is good to see a move back towards 16, toward higher, more vertical. As Sharon mentioned, on Microsoft's products, they're 3x2. which means you're getting even more vertical real estate, which is great. You just really, you could just never have enough pixels. I feel like, in fact, I think the problem is really human beings, because what you have is like the 1610 that we had on the Dell XPS 13. If you got it in 4K, it was actually above 4K. It was like, I'm trying to remember now, but normal 4K is like 2160 vertical pixels, and this was like 2300 or something. So, but the problem is, as most of you have used a Windows machine know, you're going to turn your ratio up above 100%, because things get, especially on a 13, 14, 15 inch screen, 4K is too small to see. But that's the problem with human beings. We should actually have better eyes, so that we can run everything at 100%, not boost things up, not make things enlarge anything, so you could fit more on the screen. So I'm going for the Cyborg eyes, if anyone has them, so I can use my PC better. That is, speaking of things where you could use the device better if you only had different organs or appendages. Let's talk about your 60% keyboard, Sharon. It seems to be made for people who don't like arrow keys,
Yes.
but that it's common. Like it's a very common category. I'm betting some people watching this like it. I still don't get it. But how was it for you working with a keyboard that has like all the letters but no arrows and no function keys, right? Show it to everyone again, please.
Yeah, sure. So for this keyboard, and of course there's it takes macro programming, and there's a layer of you can actually do the arrows if you hold the FN key and these buttons here. There are subscripts underneath the bottom part of the keys. So I was using FN to do all my arrow movements. Those are the keys I ended up missing the most. Most of the other navigational keys, I would tend to look down at the keyboard anyway to access them. So having to hold down an extra key to activate them wasn't a big issue. But the arrows, and I even thought about, reprogramming some of the keys so I could use arrows with one press, but there aren't 4 keys on a 60% keyboard that I'm willing to sacrifice. I've already lost so much by taking on a 60% keyboard. So yeah, just like things I do typically, I obviously do a lot of writing and editing at this job. So like going through up and down different paragraphs, left and right, to take out a little word or a little letter, it was an ordeal.
So tell everybody, what's the name and model of that keyboard?
Oh, it's a long one. So it's just the HyperX Ducky 1-2 Mini. Ducky makes other 1-2 minis. This is a special collaboration with HyperX that uses HyperX's red switches that are basically like Cherry's red switches. So they're linear, but HyperX has cut the travel slightly, which it doesn't sound like a big deal. It sounds like one of those things that is like a gimmick, but actually lining this up with a cherry red keyboard side by side and feeling the difference, I could actually notice the slightly lower travel. So if you're a gamer who's into linear keyboards and feels like you need like the smallest amount of travel possible, the HyperX red switches are actually pretty interesting and had a noticeable difference, which I appreciated.
So overall, you liked it in theory, although you had to get used to not having arrow keys.
Yeah, and actually, as I was writing this review, I came upon another 60% keyboard that some of our viewers might know about, the And Pro 2, which I haven't tried, so I can't attest to, how great or not great that is. But they actually have a feature where I believe if you tap a button instead of doing a full long press, it'll serve as an arrow key. So it's interesting because you might be able to get that arrow functionality without actually having dedicated arrow keys. So I'd be interested to try that out. But otherwise, no, I need arrow keys. That's kind of like all I need. I could live without the rest of them, but the arrow keys.
So, I guess I'm gonna ask you both a really deeply personal question, which is, what type of keyboard do you use on a regular basis? What type of keys do you like? Sharon, how about you first?
Well, for work, I do like a full-size keyboard because I like the numpad for doing spreadsheets. At home, I could do 10 keyless because the numbers are still on top and I don't need to use numbers all the time unless I'm working. And I don't know if you meant also in terms of switches, but I actually prefer something Yeah, tactile or clicky. I like blue switches. But reds I understand are popular for gaming, but for me I need a keyboard that, because I do so much writing, it has to be both for gaming and productivity. And for typing, I love the tactile bump.
How about you, Paul?
Greens or browns. I like keys that are hard to hit down. My fingers are really big, so when I type, they hit everything. And I'm a terrible typist, so having to require a lot of force when you type is actually ideal for me. So I have a Cooler Master. I couldn't tell you the name of it, probably it's at my lab, but it's a very nice keyboard. It has all the latest RGB. It's like a blinking spaceship, but the keys are stiff. I like really stiff keys, so I love those. I can't use reds. If I use reds, it's a train wreck. If I use reds.
Well, I'm a really big clicky switch enthusiast myself. In fact, my wife used to get, when we lived in a one-bedroom apartment, my wife used to get so upset because I had to use my IBM Model M keyboard with the old buckling spring switches. I just really, really loved it.
Those are the best.
And she would hear it coming through the wall to the bedroom and be like, "You're keeping me up with that." But as Sharon will attest, at the office, I use a clicky keyboard all the time.
Yeah.
Right now, my favorite switches, though, are the Kale White switches, which are really clicky, but they have a little bit shorter travel, like 3.5 instead of 4 millimeters on a typical blue switch. And so I'm able to type faster. I really like the click with them. I haven't seen anything yet that I like better, although I'd like to try some more variety. I mean, green, I like green, which are, for those who are in the know, blue or standard. The most common clicky switch is the blue one, is blue. Then you have green, which is heavier. You got to press a bit harder. Kale White is in the mix. And then there's some other ones that I haven't really gotten to try yet that are kind of rare. Like I think there's a Kale Navy and a Kale Jade that are different levels of heaviness of clicky. Right now I'm using an inexpensive keyboard called the Hex Gears Impulse. It is not a it's a gaming keyboard, but it doesn't have any fancy software. But I just love the white switches, and what Hex Gears did to really make this a great keyboard for typing is they put a heavier switch under the space bar. So all the keys are white switch except for the space bar, which is blue. And that because the space bar, you hit it a little harder because you hit it with your thumb. So having more resistance on the space bar is good. I love my white switches, and they're unfortunately not many keyboards that use them. As far as buttons go, I'm the opposite philosophy of the 60%. I'd like more keys. Like I have a full keyboard, but what I'd really like is to have a terminal keyboard that has like extra function keys. Like if I could have like nothing but buttons here, I would. If every single action I could take on the computer was just done with a key press, I would. I've looked into getting an old terminal keyboard, but a lot of them don't have a Windows key, and they certainly don't have the switches that I want. But if anyone knows how I could like make a terminal keyboard with the switches I want, please drop me a line, because I feel like you could just never have enough buttons. I just like to have buttons on the wall, buttons on my head, buttons everywhere.
I'm not that crazy, but I can't live without a numpad. I mean, even on laptops for years, I always insisted upon having a numpad. I couldn't imagine giving up arrow keys. That would be frustrating.
I did it for the job.
Yeah, the sacrifices.
You would have to pay me to do it. Yes.
The sacrifices you make. The sacrifices we make. So,
have you ever experimented with those little rubber washers for keyboards?
Yes. I think they're called O-rings or something.
Yeah.
I don't like them. So that's
I love them.
Why do you love them?
Well, because especially with the stiffer keys, you have to jam down, and it's kind of just jarring. And well, of course they're very loud too. But when you use those, it's more of a bounce instead of that bam. That hard stop down at the bottom. So.
Well, I
and
really
it kills
want.
a little bit of the sounds your wife might make.
Oh, yeah, but I like the sound. I like the sound. It's like
It,
someone who likes to drive a motorcycle, ride a motorcycle. You don't want it to be quiet.
it's the best of both worlds. You still hear it. You still
I,
know you're typing, jamming those
Skeptical.
browns.
I want the keyboard key to jump up and punch me in the face and break my nose, and that prevents that from happening. So I'm against that. Uh, speak. Speaking of things we have that are tactile, I wanted to talk real quick about some stuff we've covered on the site, projects people can do. So I have in front of me here a Raspberry Pi with SenseHat. We have an article up on the site right now about projects you and your kids can do with a Raspberry Pi and SenseHat. So what this does is, so this, by the way, for those not familiar with a Raspberry Pi for a second, this is a Raspberry Pi by itself. This is a Raspberry Pi 4, and this is one that has a SenseHat on it. A hat, standing for hardware attached on top, is the thing that you plug into these pins up here, these GPIO pins, and it gives you all kinds of special functionality. So this one is called the SenseHat, and it's actually made by the Raspberry Pi Foundation, so it's a first-party product, and it has a few really cool things on it. One is it has this 8x8 light LED light matrix here that you could program to light up. It's called the SenseHat because there's a lot of sensors. So it has a temperature sensor, an accelerometer, humidity sensor, pressure sensor, and it also has a joystick on it. So you can use programming languages such as Scratch, which is a good programming language for kids because it's block based and you could just drag and drop to do programs. So you see here it says up. That's because I programmed the joystick to make it say up when I do that. So I can turn it off by hitting spacebar and then up. That's not very impressive, but if I had the rest of my program here, you could make it go down, around. I had programmed it to actually do a countdown like a clock. But there's a lot of fun projects you can do with this. My son was actually using it in concert with a game that he's programming in Python.
Wow.
So he's programming a game in Python, which is a common text programming language that people use in the Raspberry Pi a lot. And I showed him how, like, it's a really simple game where you're in a car and things are coming at you and you can crash, that it will say, like, that the screen on this will say, the LED matrix here will say, like, you crashed when you crashed in the game. So that's kind of cool. One thing I've been hoping to do, although I don't know if the SenseHat is the right hat for it, is I really want to make a hand washing timer for Raspberry Pi. Now that we're all at home and we have to we have to hand wash for 20 seconds. I want to create something where you put it in front of your sink. You can wave or something. Don't touch it. You wave or make a sound or something to trigger it, and then it counts up to 20 seconds while you're washing your hands, so you know that you disinfected for the right amount of time. Of course, it was for my son. It would sense that he was done using the toilet and then tell him to flush. But that's another level of AI that I haven't figured out yet.
If he could program a video game, he could start flushing the toilet.
I think the problem is that he's so busy wanting to program the video game that he forgets some of the more important things. So his cache is often full and not flushed. Let's put it that way.
Abram, how much is the SenseHat?
Oh, $30.
That's okay.
So it's typically around $30. Depending on Amazon, you might be a little more there because sometimes their stuff there isn't as cheap for Raspberry Pi stuff. And of course, a Raspberry Pi 4 is $35. So not expensive at all to get started with. And we have a lot of articles about Raspberry Pi and getting started with it, but also specifically projects you can do with the SenseHat on tomshardware.com. Well, we're getting toward the end of our show. I wanted to ask if anyone from the audience had any questions or comments that they want to talk about before we roll. Let's see. Anybody? Bids? Well, I guess we've got a quiet group. So I'm going to thank Sharon and Paul and all of you for joining us. If you didn't join us live, that's okay, because you can enjoy all of this later on YouTube. Please leave us your comments there and hopefully an upvote. and a subscription. For Tom's Hardware, I'm Abram.
I'm
Paul.
Sharon.
And I'm Paul. I'm off timing.
See you next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.